Today's story is horrifying not just for its theme, but also the location. Set off the coast of Scotland on an oil rig that's already falling apart, something is stirring in the ocean depths that'll bring ruin to everything. We're going to go through the story first, so we're all on the same page, and then at the end, I'm going to throw some ideas out there for what the entity actually is, as the devs never explain what it is to increase the horror. The story begins 23rd of December 1975 with Cameron McCleary, or Kaz as he'll be referred to for most of the story. Kaz is reading a letter from his wife Suze. She can't believe he'd leave to go to the oil rig and just run away from his issues, which we'll find out more about as the game goes on. She also starts hinting at getting a divorce, which will help explain Kaz's mental state later on. But before Kaz can linger too long on his life falling apart around him, there's a knock at the door to let him know that breakfast is nearly over, so if he wants to eat something, he needs to get there fast. But first, before we get to breakfast, let's get to know some of the other people we're stuck on this death trap with. Heading into Trot Campbell's room, we can find a telegraph that shows that Trot is the union representative. And he's been contacting Cadal about a strike that they were going to begin due to the fact no one had even responded to any of the workers' genuine safety concerns working on this oil rig. Just a few seconds later, we can see the state of disrepair when Kaz opens O'Connor's room. The roof is leaking and the walls are covered in black mold. Nothing eldritch about this, just poor upkeep on the management side. When Kaz meets Finley, she's trying to repair more pipes that are leaking in the roof. And she mentions that they've only just begun drilling, but the rig is already falling apart due to Cadal and Rennick cutting corners. Also, Rennick is mad as hell at Kaz for a letter he received from the mainland earlier today. Kaz also gives Finley his lighter, which may or may not come back later on. Over in Adir's room, Kaz finds National Front propaganda, cementing Adir as the worst kind of sewer garbage.
Doesn't he surprise me? Prick.
Kaz will meet him soon, and we'll discuss his dispossession at the end as it ties into my theory on the entity itself. On a nearby wall, Kaz finds a note from management further cementing this place as being corrupt and poorly managed. Due to the ongoing strike action, no one will be receiving a bonus this year, although I get the feeling that doesn't apply to upper management. Kaz finally reaches the canteen, and we can meet some of the other characters in this story. Trot, Gibbo, and O'Connor are discussing union action to prevent more oil rigs being thrown up by cutting corners at the cost of the workers' safety. Brody and Rafts are discussing the fact Rafts is going on his first solo dive in the diving bell, and he's nervous as hell. Kaz doesn't really help him with this either. Adir, surprise surprise, is sat on his own and doesn't have anything nice to say. He mostly just wants to see Kaz arrested for existing. Talking to the cook Roy, Rennick immediately cuts in over the intercom, commanding Kaz to get to his office. Before going though, Kaz mentions to the Roy that Suze is thinking about divorce, and we find out that Kaz is here hiding from the police for insulting someone who insulted Suze. Kaz has a little bit of a temper. Dobby interrupts and mentions that Trot has left Roy's insulin in his cabin, and Kaz heads off to find Rennick. Just before leaving, Kaz dons his hat and gloves and heads out onto the deck proper, where we can see the drill in all its non-functioning glory. Talking to Roper, Kaz finds out the drill isn't functioning right now, and no one can work out why. They don't need an electrician like Kaz though, so he carries on his way to Rennick. The meeting with Rennick goes as well as expected, with Kaz getting the boot for bringing the police sniffing around the oil rig. Rennick probably doesn't want them to find out about any of the corners he's been cutting. More interestingly though, Rennick receives a call during this from who we can assume is probably Roper, explaining the drill stoppage. Rennick then gives the stupidest command of his entire career and tells them to just drill through it. After getting fired, Kaz heads straight to the helicopter, presumably to leave, as he's just been told to without saying goodbye to anyone. However, he's just that little bit too late. If he'd just been a little bit earlier, he could have got off of the rig and none of this would have affected him, personally. Whatever they drilled into caused a series of explosions to rock the rig, knocking Kaz off as he tries to save one of his co-workers, resulting in being knocked out and reliving his memory of him and Roy telling Suze about escaping to the oil rig until the police heat cools off. Phasing in and out of consciousness, Kaz was rescued from where he fell, but when he comes around, he's alone. A little disorientated, Kaz heads out of the cabin and finds Brody trying to rescue Raph from the diving bell. Something's gone wrong, and inside all we can hear is Raph screaming and banging around. After pulling up the diving bell, Brody admits to having no idea what's going on. The drill might have hit something, but the only way we'll know for sure is to head to engineering. The only route to engineering is under the rig. Once under the rig, we can see just how extensive the damage was, with walkways collapsing all over the place. As Kaz approaches the center of the rig, we get our first view of what happened. Something, some kind of entity, has grown up and through the drill and is now kind of giving off some kind of bioluminescent light. The light calls to Kaz, but thankfully, his attention is pulled away from it before he can walk off the edge. Kaz finally makes it inside of Leg C after traversing several incredibly dangerous walkways. He finds that not only is the inside very damaged, the entity is somehow already growing up the inside of the leg. Rennick also, once again, shows just how little of a damn he gives about anything but profits, as he speaks over the intercom that nothing is wrong and it's just a temporary drill issue. Thankfully, Kaz finds a light and heads into the oil rig proper, which is just a mess. And someone, or more likely, from the sounds of it, something, is screaming down in the depths of the rig.
The fuck is that?
Finally, after crawling through pitch black spaces with nothing but the sounds of those screams haunting him, Kaz finds a friendly face. Finley doesn't have good news though. The screams are coming from Gibbo, one of the other workers. He got some weird oil on him and he changed, became violent and attacked Finley. The only way to get to accommodations is through the water tanks where Gibbo is patrolling. Kaz heads off and before long finds one of the other workers, changed, absorbed and extended by the entity. We'll come back to what I think is happening here at the end of the video. Also, you'll notice as we go through there's an effect on Kaz's mind whenever he's close to any parts of the entity. The way they show that is by these weird blotches that appear on the screen. Once Kaz has climbed, crawled, and cussed his way through to the water tanks, he encounters Gibbo. Gibbo doesn't want to be seen because of what he's been turned into, and just wants to be left alone. Unfortunately, Kaz needs to get through, so he does his best to avoid seeing Gibbo, which works up until the last moment when we catch a glimpse of what has happened to the poor fella. Once he's been knocked down into the water tank, Kaz also finds what's left of Douglas. Luckily, Kaz can climb out and it appears that Gibbo can't follow. He's stuck down here. And as we leave, we can hear him crying about what he did to Douglas, begging for help with what's happening to him. It's really kind of sad. Finally, Kaz has escaped the depths of the oil rig and is in accommodations. Hopefully, someone else is around. Before he finds anyone though, there's a call from engineering. Looks like the power is starting to cut out, at the least just in accommodations, so the phone line drops before Kaz can tell them how to get up. Looks like the entity has spread up here too. Kaz is looking for Roy right now though. The door to the cafeteria is blockaded, and the only way around is blocked by the entity, so Kaz needs to go the long way around. As Kaz enters the crew lounge, in the toilets he can hear Trot screaming, and the same light Kaz saw before starts to shine through the door. There's no moving it though, so Kaz has to move on. In the cafeteria, Kaz gets some good news finally. Roy is still alive and stockpiling a back room with food to hide in. Roy saw something out on the deck, but it terrified him, so he ran and hid. They agreed that Roy should stay hidden while Kaz goes and tries to get one of the lifeboats ready to leave, so they can escape this hell. As Kaz leaves, he finds more people who begin to merge with the entity. Their heads are enlarged and pulsating boils can be seen forming around them. As Roy walks past, the entity exhibits explosive growth, ripping through the wall and floor in front of him, and Kaz begins to complain of a headache. Heading through the laundry room, turns out the flesh in the ceiling is actually alive, and as Kaz leaves, it attempts to ensnare him with its tentacles. This will prove to be a fairly common tactic among the changed. Luckily for Kaz though, this one missed and is polite enough to close the door behind him. Thanks for that. As Kaz opens the door to the port side, we can see that a lot of it is just gone. The rig is falling apart and we can only see a few lifeboats below. So, that's where Kaz needs to head next. On the way, Rennick finally sees the light and puts out the evacuation order, although he still states they'll be back to work in a couple of minutes. Unfortunately for Kaz, the life rafts are a no-go. One is already damaged, and upon trying to lower the other life raft, it snaps off, plummeting to the depths below. Rennick calls, and it's his usual pleasant self about the fact the lifeboats are all gone now, but surprisingly, he actually tells Kaz to grab anyone he can and get to the helicopter pad. Kaz makes his way up top, fighting fires along his way, just to get another call from the derrick. Honestly, Kaz should have been a secretary with the amount of phone answering he does. Inns calls us from the derrick. He's panicked and scared and doesn't know what to do about someone who's transforming in the background. Heading into the utility part of accommodation, the entity is spreading everywhere, meaning Kaz needs to bypass it by climbing through vents to get to Roy. In the laundry room, we can see just what's happened to one of the poor workers who's still mobile. They've gained a lot of mass and move via tentacles that seem to be sprouting off of every part of them. We'll also see that they have multiple sets of arms, so maybe they're a conglomeration of workers, or just experiencing some form of explosive cancerous growth. Unfortunately, they're in between Kaz and the cafeteria, so he has to sneak on by Trots. Luckily, Trots doesn't seem to be too bright now. Meeting up with Roy, we let him know that we need to head to the helicopter, but unfortunately, Roy needs his insulin or he won't make it. This means Kaz needs to go stop Rennick taking off before he leaves Roy behind. Heading onto the deck, a damn fog has settled in, so it's hard to see anything, but something is moaning out there.
I don't like the sound of that. Whatever it is.
Kaz soon finds out what's making the noise, though, as Dobby is ripped away from him by the mutated Muir.
Christ almighty.
Inns is hiding nearby, and they both agree they need to get across the deck to the helicopter. After dashing from container to get across the deck, Kaz gets the lift running so that he and Inns can get up to the helicopter, only for Muir to grab Inns at the last second. As Kaz approaches the landing pad from below, Rennick can be heard arguing with Archie. He wants to take off now. And just as Kaz gets to the top, they take off, dooming everyone. Although, it doesn't work out for them either, as the helicopter soon comes crashing back into the platform. I wonder what caused that. Kaz is once again knocked out by this collision and has a flashback to Sue's berating him for his decision to leave to the oil rig, abandoning his little girls.
If you run, if you go, then we are done. Hear me?
On Kaz's way back inside, he finds a letter from the police asking for his arrest due to the serious nature of the assault. The phone on the wall is once again ringing off the hook, and this time it's Brody. He wants to radio for help, but the generators are starting to cut out, so Kaz needs to head down there to fix them. He is real good with the lecky after all. On his way to engineering, Kaz has to pass through admin. Upon entering, he gets a call from Scooby. There's someone in the walls below admin hunting them, which is exactly where Kaz needs to go next. Kaz soon finds out what the problem is. It appears Rennick got even more big-headed since we last saw him, and is now going to hunt him through admin, breaking through the walls like he's the goddamn Kool-Aid man. Once Kaz escapes, and after some more free climbing down the side of the oil rig, Kaz answers a call from Bruce. He had to leave O'Connor behind, and now he's drowning in the lower decks. Sounds like the rig is starting to take on water. Finally, in engineering, Kaz finds Finley still hiding out down there. Luckily, she can help get these generators up and running, as they're a little more advanced than what Kaz is used to. After resetting the elevator relay, we find out there's a fault that Finley can fix, but Kaz needs to reset the generators first. Unfortunately for Kaz, a deer appears, and a deer is still not too fond of him. So he's going to do his best to hunt him down. After a lot of going back and forth to fix this generator, Kaz gets it working and just manages to get away from a deer. Getting the power back on, Brody gives Kaz a call. The rig is beginning to sink, so Brody needs some help down in the pontoons. If they engage the tension winches in the legs, they can buy some time. Kaz's mental state at this point is getting pretty depressed, understandably. And after engaging the tension winch, he's ready to head into Lake B. The only problem being that to get there, he'll have to swim. As Kaz reaches the waterlogged bottom of the rig, the deaths he's seen, the pressure on his mind by the entity, and the oppressive darkness begin to fracture his mind. He starts to hear Sue's while awake. Nothing to do but push forward though, even when the connector between the two legs fills with water. After barely managing to get through before drowning, Kaz breaks the surface into another dark room. After managing to swim through, Kaz finally finds O'Connor. He's still alive, kind of. He's still somewhat conscious, but attached to the entity, and without seeming to even mean to, he attacks Kaz with his tentacles while asking for help. Luckily, the thing is very weak and Kaz's screwdriver makes quick work of it. Finally, in Leg B, parts of it are on fire and oil seems to be leaking down from above. But Kaz engages the tension winch and now has an oddly beautiful elevator ride. It's probably about time to check in with Roy again as well. Roy still hasn't managed to get his shot yet and is starting to sound really rough. But Kaz is pulled away by yet another explosion in the background. The entire rig is falling apart at this point. And so is Kaz. He gets another call on the phone before he sets off, and it's Sue's. It's a memory, a phone call he had with her at some point in the past, and he even starts to hear his own replies to her. Crossing the deck to get to the explosion, the entity sprouting out of the drill has grown, is emitting more light. It's also dripping oil from the burst drill, and upon reaching it, the voice of Sue's gets much stronger. Shaking it off and climbing up though, Kaz finally meets up with Brody, who once again has some bad news. The stack is on the verge of exploding, so Kaz needs to go out and switch over to the auxiliary pipe to stop it feeding back into the main rig. Just before heading to the other side of the rig though, Kaz reads a note from Finley. The radios have no signal, and she states that they know what they have to do now. Over on the stack, a deer hunts Kaz once again, but after being chased, Kaz is able to light the auxiliary pipes and a deer with a flare. That did cause an explosion though, so once again, Kaz goes plummeting. By now, we know what happens next. Kaz is unconscious and has a flashback to Suze. She just wanted him to sort out the problem rather than running away from the police and abandoning his children. We also learned that it wasn't a small assault. The other guy was put in hospital. Somehow waking up under the oil rig, the water has nearly reached the bottom of the rig, and the original growth of the entity is glowing red now? The actual ocean is also being whipped up into a frenzy as well. Making his way back across to get inside, Kaz sees what happened to poor Raph on his first dive in the diving bell. And also a note from Finley to Brody telling him to meet her in engineering to sort this out. In gas separation, Kaz meets Brody and Finley, both who are surprised to see him alive. The rig is sinking and the only hope for them is to cut it loose and balance out the legs. Hopefully, they'll just float back up. But just at that moment, Roy gets onto the intercom. He's in a cabin at the top of the rig and he's without his insulin. He doesn't have long left, so Kaz does what he has to and he leaves Brody and Finley to deal with the rig while he goes to save Roy. The only way to accommodations is through engineering, which is full of water and oil, so Kaz will need to swim through it. In accommodation, the place is covered in the entity. It's taken over most of the rig now, and Kaz once again finds Trot, who's going to hunt him through the corridors. Eventually, Kaz finds Roy's insulin, and then makes a break for it. Trot gives chase, and the roof collapses on top of him, saving Kaz. Reaching the roof, things look bad. The entity has grown tremendously in a spiral pattern, and is somehow creating a floating barricade of debris around itself. Kaz finally gets to the cabin at the top to find Roy, but he's too late. Finley calls because she wasn't able to make it to Marine Control, so it's up to Kaz now. He needs to travel across the top of the deck, which is barely holding together, and call Finley to walk him through what he needs to do there. In Marine Control, Kaz finds what's left of Roper attached to the entity. Roper manages to hold off on attacking Kaz until he finishes flooding the pontoons to right the rig. And mostly, even despite the fact he attacks at the end, Roper just seems scared of Rennick coming for him. Once everything is sorted, Kaz needs to head to drill operations to meet Finley and Brody. On the way, the rig floods and washes him through it. Somehow, he narrowly manages to avoid being impaled or drowned. He once again comes face to giant face with Rennick. Rennick is too big to fit through some of the spaces, thankfully, and as the water keeps rising, he finally stops chasing Kaz. Finally meeting up with Finley, Brody is nowhere to be seen. He's on the other side of the phone. He was trapped in the pontoons with no way out. But he wants us to keep our hopes up. This proves to be the final straw for Finley, though, as she has to break down and sets off to just destroy the entire rig. Kaz chases her down, trying to get her to see reason before a girder falls on her. She convinces Kaz that they can't let this get to the mainland, as it'll be impossible to stop the spread. So Kaz takes his lighter back from her and heads into the light. The entity around the drill sounds like a giant heartbeat. And as Kaz walks to the edge, he throws the lighter down while apologizing to Suze for not making it back. As everything goes up in a flash of light, Kaz comes to and begins to swim down to the source of the light while hearing Suze's voice, before flashing back to the morning he left them, and a letter from Suze that apologized for how hard things have been, and how they'll get through it together. A note Kaz never received before he passed as a hero.
Kaz, I'm sorry it's been so hard. Just wanted to send you this. To say we'll get through it. We will. Just take care out there and bring my beautiful big gallus man back home in one piece, okay? I miss you and I love you. And the girls miss and love you. I'm still raging at Roy, but he's a good man and I know he'll look after you. Whatever happens, we will be alright. We can weather this. Just wanted to say that to you, Kaz. To keep you safe and close and make sure you know to come home to us. I love you, Cameron McCleary.
And that is the story of Still Wakes the Deep. The devs were purposely vague with the creature, the entity that's causing this, to add to the horror. It's unknown. It wasn't created in a lab. It has no motives we can understand. But I'd like to make some guesses, and I'd love to hear what you think as well. So firstly, we have no idea where it came from. It's fairly safe to assume it isn't native to Earth, or, quite frankly, everything would have been wiped out ages ago. The next parts are some weird conjecture on my part, again, because we don't have a lot of evidence to go on. But what if it traveled here on an asteroid? But rather than hitting land, it crashed deep into the ocean, sinking deep below before it became covered in sand and debris, and the remains of all the other sea creatures around it turned to oil. Then along come humans, we start mining it. When they drilled through the obstruction, the outer core of the asteroid it was in, they released it, and it burst forth looking for fuel after the long hibernation it had undergone. Now, think about the only hint we really get as to its end goal. The spire it starts to form, using all the biomass it had collected from all the poor workers. The spire starts to have an effect on the weather and the ocean around it, causing strange air currents and weather patterns. What if it's beginning to terraform the planet to something more habitable for itself or whoever sent it? It gathers creatures, turns them into either sustenance, the ones it absorbs into itself, or gatherers, the ones like a deer who chases down. Then it uses that biomass to slowly change the world around it to become more habitable. I'm kind of taking influence from different places for this, because I see different influences on the creature. I know a lot of people, a lot of the articles are all saying the same thing. It's the thing on an oil rig, which I get, it's understandable. But I see more Dead Space. You've got your necromorphs and your marker. And also the color out of space, an old Lovecraft book about a meteor that dropped from space. It gave off a strange light that changed everyone and everything around it, slowly infecting the land and changing it. Does that sound kind of familiar right now? Light has been a big part of this entity and how it affects the minds of the workers, either making them approach it and become one with it, or for those who resist, they slowly begin to relive memories of their loved ones until, I'm assuming the end goal is the impressions get so strong that they eventually give up and join the entity, like the markers from Dead Space. And I said I'd mention it, but the change themselves, as the light has a big effect on mental states, it seems to attach to the negative emotions people have in them. Take a deer, for example, the violent, national first arsehole. With him and Rennick, for that matter, both of whom dislike Kaz, it seems more personal. Gibbo and Muir aren't as directed. With Gibbo, he just seems scared and he's lashing out. We do also see a deer and Rennick later on though, so it may just be that the effect is stronger over time and makes them become more violent. If we were to encounter Gibbo at the end, would he still just seem to be acting out, or would he seem as focused and violent as the deer was? I'm open to discussion on this though, as it's one of my favourite parts of games like these. All the theory crafting, coming up with reasons, motives, just origins for the creature. Especially in a game like this where they leave it so open-ended, it's really just fun to try and see what we can kind of work out as a community. So let me know down below what you think, and if there's anything you want to see me do next. We do have a couple projects on the go, but I'm always looking for more that we can look into. Also, you can find the full gameplay over on my VODs channel, which the link is in the description, and you can always catch me doing stuff like this live on my Twitch. I'll catch you all next time.